All right, 260 points lower on the Nifty is what we have. We are a couple of days away from budget F523. We've been discussing various facets of what can be expected. The last discussion we did day before yesterday was infrastructure and what we should expect. Today, we're going to focus on an important source of non-tax revenue for the government, divestments. Former Finance Secretary Mr. S.C. Garg and Rajeev R. Shah, Managing Director and CEO at RBSA Advisors, are joining us on the show to discuss this. Gentlemen, good to have both of you here. Thank you very much. Mr. Garg, F522 arguably was a fantastic year for equity markets in which perhaps a lot could have happened. But it was also an year where the economy was coming out of a pandemic, so there were lots of other things to focus on as well. But the fact remains that as compared to the target, divestment target of about 1.7 odd lakh crores, just over 10,000 crores was achieved. What should we expect in F523 in your opinion?
So FI22 performance is as lackluster as 1920 and 2021. That should in a way be setting the tone for 23 as well. Because government's privatization agenda and the divestment agenda of minority stake seems to have hit a wall. The privatization of banks, including IDBI, BPCL, others didn't take off. And if we go into the reasons why they did not take off, we'll probably tell you why in 2022-23 also things might be difficult.
We'll come to you in a bit, Mr. Garg. We have Rajeev Shah who's also joining into the conversation. Rajeev, so the consensus view is that the divestment receipts in FY22 won't be that great. In fact, it'll be a miss. What are you expecting in terms of the key number? And even if some of these deals are delayed into FY23, are you expecting a bigger divestment target from the government in FY23? I think the most optimistic in terms of brokerage views came in from Jefferies, where they have a 1.5 lakh crore target. What would your own expectation be?
Sonia, thank you for having me. I would take a view just slightly different from Mr. Garg. FY22, I would sense that LIC IPO is very much imminent. And that would garner at least 50 to 60,000 crores, depending on what estimate that we look at. So while the actual delivery would be lower than the target, but as you would appreciate, each of these strategic disinvestments are quite complex, and it takes multiple stakeholders. The targets have to be created worthy for a transaction, and that takes a little time. My sense of FY22 would be at least 65,000 crores given LIC IPO. Right? We believe it would be a great success. And that would be the first tranche of LIC IPO, and market is just testing the waters with that. My also sense is that given the first tranche in FY23, we can expect a second tranche of LIC IPO. And that would again give buoyancy to FY23 receipts. And many of these disinvestments, which may spill over to FY23, the Concor, Bharat Petroleum, Shipping Corporation, most of them would see light of the day in FY23. And therefore, my sense is that the FY23 number would be at least 1.5 lakhs crores or thereabouts. So I'm fairly more optimistic about FY23 than what has happened and actually what has been delivered in FY20.
Mr. Shah, you counting BPCL in here as well?
My sense is that yes, BPCL should happen next year, given that the process is on and still we are not in the final stages of that process. So FY22 definitely it's not happening, but FY23 is definitely BPCL should be on in that year.
Okay. Mr. Garg, come in on this. Rajeev is looking at about 50 to 60,000 crores coming in from LIC this fiscal itself. I know you're not as optimistic, but your view nevertheless. And also in FY23, there's a long list of likely divestment candidates, right? Whether it's BPCL that Prashant was referring to, there's Concor, BEML, Shipping Corp, Hindustan Zinc. According to you, what could fructify in the coming fiscal?
I think we should also deal with the LIC issue very carefully. The LIC profits for the shareholders, recently the 6 months results were out, And the 6 monthly profits for shareholders were only about 1,420 odd crores. The annual profits for shareholders are only about 3,000 crores. Now, for a company which delivers 3,000 crores for the shareholders.
So Rajeev, just comment on this. I mean, you are expecting LIC to go through, but if it doesn't get executed in this year, what would that do to your divestment assumption for FY23? And are we staring at a higher fiscal deficit number if what Mr. Garg says comes true?
Surya, I mean, just to respond on that, see, I agree with Mr. Garg that the historical profitability numbers may not be a right representative of LIC's value. Principally because LIC was distributing 100% of its surplus to policyholders, which is different. In commercial markets, and as we read from media reports, government is actually changing the structure of distributing more and more surplus to equity shareholders. Now, once that structure is in place, that would lead to a significant increase in LIC's profitability. So the right way of valuing LIC would not be valuing it on historical profitability when you are giving all the profits to policyholders and nothing to shareholders. Now, as and when the structure is brought more in line with the market, then the profitability of LIC should and will zoom. And that would be a right way of valuing LIC. And obviously the embedded value, the assets and everything. The very fact that the kind of Ping An Insurance in China or other companies in US, MetLife in US or Prudential in US, those are the kind of benchmarks which one should look at. And the very fact that the structure of LIC, the distribution structure of LIC is changing, I think that would give a very, very different complexion to the valuation of LIC. But I agree with you that if for any reason, if these numbers do not come through and this disinvestment, but then government also has Hindustan Zinc.
Yeah.
See, you think about it, they've already given undertaking in Supreme Court that they will be selling in public through stock exchange. Now, given that, government has all the flexibility of selling Hindustan Zinc at a short notice. In case they want to bridge a fiscal deficit gap, Hindustan Zinc, there is ready buyer. It's a great asset. There are institutional investors. There is a very, very limited market float. And there is a commodity prices are at an all-time high. So what better time to sell Hindustan Zinc, the residual stake, than this?
Mr. Shah and Mr. Garg, thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us on this divestment-focused budget-related preview. Thank you indeed for being with us here on CNBC TV18. Well, the market